Thank you to all of our speakers. Liz Ritchie from CEDA. I'm actually going to kick off with a hard one for Brian Riley.
Thank you, Liz.
My pleasure. Brian, you've talked about the South Australian inquiry, and I guess my question to you is, if you had a crystal ball, what do you see as being potential outcomes from that inquiry, and what would be some likely flow-on effects perhaps here in Western Australia?
Look, it is a tough question, but let me look at address the 4 issue papers. The first is expansion of exploration, mining, and milling. I think there are runs that could be put on the board today, and perhaps Barry's presentation would feed nicely into that in terms of regulatory reform, infrastructure, access to ports, all those types of things. We could be implementing those kinds of changes today. So that's, I think, the easy one, and I suspect you'll see tangible results coming very quickly. In terms of the further processing, that will depend on the markets today and some projection into the future. Conversion, enrichment, fuel fabrication, there's lots of competition out there, but the case study would have to be made to see if it would be competitive to build those facilities in South Australia. I'll save electricity generation for last. When it comes to storage and disposal of, and we're talking about low-level waste, again, you'd have to make a business case. I think Australia is absolutely prime geologically for that type of facility. I think there could be some real interesting results coming out of the storage and disposal facility option. The piece that's really exciting for me is just having this debate on nuclear energy, and I think it's a long-term debate, and it may be a decade or two before we land on a decision in terms of nuclear energy, but I think that's really exciting. So Liz, tough question, but hopefully that provides some framework in terms of where we might see the report in May land on some of these issues.
Thank you for that answer. Do we have any further questions? I've got a question perhaps for Michael, if you wouldn't mind. Consolidation obviously is a hot topic in the gold sector, and we've seen a trend emerging with established players such as Barrick exiting the market and some new players such as Evolution and Northern Star sort of increasing their footprint in Western Australia. Do you think this trend will continue?
Look, I think it will. I think now is a key time also for merger and acquisition activity. The Australian gold market, for instance, is quite hot, as I described, largely as a function of currency at the present moment. There's activity where juniors, mid-sized companies now are being able to pick up operations from the large operators that have perhaps that have to deal with debt. We recently sold a significant asset in North America to do just that, and a number of the other majors are doing that. So there's a little bit of that going on, and I think the Australian market is very open for larger listed companies to grow in Australia.
Thank you. Any more questions? Question over here. Over here.
Good afternoon, it's Nicholas Creed at King & Wood Mallisons. A question for Barry, if I may. Barry, you mentioned, and I want to see that movie in real time, you mentioned the number of regulatory approvals that you needed. Have you worked out what you think would be the quick wins and the quick approvals and regulatory processes that you'd like to see gone first?
We've put in a number of, in the papers, we've put some examples possibly of the largest ones that we would have. So to a certain extent, yes. As I said, but we are committed to refining what we've done. What we did initially
And given that we've got a few other things to do at the present time, particularly as you see that we haven't started first ore on ship, we will refine the list we have, but certainly we've put in some recommendations in the paper to date based on the preliminary assessment, but we will finalise that and work it out in greater detail.
I think we had a question over here.
Hi, it's Andrew Smith from Shell. I've got a couple of questions. First to Rob. Rob, could you describe some of the problems that you and the teams came across with the introduction of the continuous improvement approach? Lots of companies have tried it. Some succeed, some fail. That's the first question. The second question is, it's too good an opportunity to miss the chance to ask so many people who have been around the industry for a long time. What lessons have you taken from previous commodity cycles that you're using this time?
Thank you for that question. In terms of some of the problems we faced as we look to get into the swing of improving, there were many. But the insights, I think, a lot of them were our own doing. One thing I learned early on in my career is that people think deeply about their role and about their job. And it's about taking barriers away from them to let them be freed up to get on and do it as well as they think it can be done. So we had barriers to do with some of the processes and some of the things that we'd put in place with good intent that were meeting the wrong outcome. Another issue we needed to overcome was we were okay in our own spaces and the different areas of work in improving, but working together collaboratively is something that takes a slightly different mindset. So we had to look at ways to demonstrate the value that we wanted in terms of people reaching out from their own space and at times take a hit in their own space for the greater good. And it's about what you get energised about and what you value that starts to get reflected in your teams. So those would be a couple of examples of barriers we needed to overcome. In terms of the lessons I've learned in the commodities I've worked in, going through the cycles, and I was talking to Nick at the table earlier at lunch, I remember the days of $250 gold under Robert de Crespigny, and he said every day we're getting closer to $500 gold. You know, I'd love to run into him again and tell him it's well over 1,000. But the work doesn't change. It's still about doing it the best way you can and doing it as well as you can. So it's almost like as much as some things change, they actually stay the same. So, yeah, I don't know that it's much different between the boom and the bust, if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Look, Andrew, if I may, you know, if we could, during the boom cycle, just cut the top off and save it for the down cycle, we'd be much wiser for it. But we don't, unfortunately. From a Cameco Corporation perspective, I think what we've tried to do with capital discipline and increasing productivity is make it sustainable, Andrew, and that's the challenge. So not just committing short term, but committing longer term, and that will be the challenge for us.
Can I add one thing about the cycles boom? If you haven't looked at the price of iron ore from about 1965 to about 2005, it diminished in real terms year on year. Perturbations on that were very, very small. So in terms of commodity cycle, don't look for iron ore because basically it was a straight line decline. 2005 or so it went up and then it's coming back down. Yet to hopefully not ever get back to the real-time decrease, because when you joined an iron ore industry in 1975, as I did, I was told by the very wise people, iron ore is a commodity, it will go down in real terms for as long as you live. And that isn't a cycle. So I think the message I'd say to you folks is that there's an awful lot of experience out there in the iron ore industry which says is that you need to be very focused on cost all your life.
An observation I'd make, perhaps over a number of cycles, and I've been in gold for over 25 years, at gold alone. what always intrigues me is that between the booms, you bring in, or during a boom, you bring in a new generation of young people that enter the industry. So the tragedy of the boom and bust nature of these commodity cycles is the impact on young people that come into they may well enter university because it looks fantastic. By the time they finish, it's a train smash. Or vice versa, they're shrewd and they've entered university when it's a downturn and come out in a boom period with phenomenal expectations. If, as Brian suggested, we could somehow knock the top off that, I think it would just make a career choice and working lives considerably easier as well, because a lot of good people are lost to the industry during these the downtimes. Yeah.
I'm hogging the microphone. Liz Ritchie from CEDA again. I couldn't let this opportunity go. It was 10 days ago that we held a fantastic session called Perth as an Innovation and Science Hub that was brought together by Peter Klinken, who's the new Chief Scientist. And anyone who knows our new Chief Scientist knows that he has many statistics, and one of these statistics is that Australia has the worst ranking in the OECD countries around collaboration with industry and the university and academic sector. So my question to all of you on the panel as industry leaders is, are you considering this in your future planning, and what do you think we can do to improve this poor international ranking?
Maybe if we start with Barry.
Who do you want to start with? Oh, start with me. Well, this is really interesting. You're starting with a company that doesn't have an income yet. So maybe those with deep pockets should have gone long first before me. The comment I would make, Pat, is that you would have noticed on there that Roy Hill, in terms of one of its things, it's got lead, care, think, perform. You notice that think is one of our core values. Think is also tied with knowledge and the growth of individuals to achieve their potential. We also talked about partnerships, and our business model is a very simple model. All we have is a single mine, a single rail, a single port, and basically it's been unified by a demand chain which is from one end to the other. So collaboration is our middle name internally, and certainly collaboration will be our middle name externally in terms of dealing with our suppliers and our contractors, and we've been doing stuff like that. We have set up a Roy Hill Foundation. One of its involvements is in terms of education and universities, and we are internally speaking about the Roy Hill University, which is in fact a place for people within Roy Hill to further develop their technical and other professional aspirations as well as their knowledge. So clearly, to deliver that, we will need to work collaboratively with a whole range of people. The only caveat I would have is that the collaboration is worldwide now, and I think all of our institutions need to recognise that they're working in a very global market, and as long as they do that, then I think it's all going to go well.
Rob, do you want to...
Liz, I'll give it a crack. If you look how most organisations have responded to the recent downturn in the market, we're talking 18, 24 months ago, the easy piece was the restructuring, and unfortunately there were redundancies associated with that. The cost cutting, the capital discipline, those kinds of bits. That was the easy bit. And then that productivity path and continuous improvement packaged in many shapes and sizes gets you marginal gains. But the quantum leaps or the significant steps will be made through innovation and technology, and that's the challenge. And look, I think Australia as a mining and a resource-based country is as good as any in the game, and I'm absolutely convinced we'll get there. But that's the challenge for most of the organizations now.
So I didn't know that Australia has that sort of serious problem in the past. But what we are doing in INPEX is we're working together with the university, and we're providing the funding opportunity and to set up the proper facility to develop the technical development and also education. And because the important thing is the people skill set is most important. And what we need is we need to have the right skill set person to support our project. So for that purpose, we're working together with the university to set up this kind of environment. And for me, it's very easy to work with the Australian university. They're very collaborative. And that's why so we really want to realize our dream in the future to provide educational opportunity and training opportunity to set the right skill set person for our industry.
If I could just add a couple of comments on that, because I agree with you, Hitoshi. Our experience with Australian universities has been very, very positive. And, you know, I can't speak as a broad industry, but as a company, as we've gone about trying to become as productive as we can be, the one group in our centre, technology, geoscience and engineering, is one that we've injected a whole heap of funds and enthusiasm into to take us to those next steps. And all of the technologies through from automation of equipment, trucks and drills, all the way through to the automation of the digital part that is our world now, are all fronts that we're looking to advance. So, you know, I'm not sure if some of that commentary is a bit harsh. So.
I think we've got time for one more question, if we have a question from the floor. In the middle over here.
Thanks. It's Lindsay O'Sullivan from the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I might direct this at Rob, but feel free if anyone wants to jump in. Rob's nodding vigorously there. Obviously, there are a lot of West Australian businesses that benefit from the growth of the sector over the last 10 years. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what are the opportunities for West Australian businesses in the future? What aren't they doing that could potentially they could start to look at that's going to benefit your businesses over the next 10 years?
Well, I think that's a really good question. The earlier comments around collaboration, I think, is the key here. As we looked across the globe at what are good practices to take us forward from a productivity point of view, it's working with our service providers and our vendors together to get better. So it's a two-way conversation. You know, I'll give you an example. As we look to try and improve our exploration drilling, we'd hit a bit of a brick wall. We discovered that we were getting charged benchmark rates, so we're getting a good deal there. But when we turned around and we invited in the contractors that drill for us and we asked them, what are the things that we are doing that are stopping you being more productive? It opened up a whole new line where we could both end up in a better space. So I think about it, it's looking at the issues together about how we can both take a step forward is the key. And I think there is a huge opportunity in that regard.
Did any of the other panellists wish to comment? No? All right. Well, I think that's all we've got time for today, and just about to invite Liz Ritchie up to give the closing address. I think you'd agree with me that we've had some really interesting presentations that have covered a whole range of issues which are relevant to the sectors in which we all work. And so I do thank all of the presenters for their time today and for their fantastic presentations.